Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Leading in a Crisis podcast. On this podcast, we share stories from the front lines of crisis management through interviews, storytelling, and lessons learned as shared by experienced crisis leaders. I'm Tom Mueller. Thank you for being with us again today. We love it when you join us, and please tell your friends and colleagues about us as well. Hey, if you'd like to drop an email to the show, you can drop me a line at tom@leadinginacrisis.com, and I certainly look forward to hearing from you. On our show today, we're going to do a quick hot take on the communications around the Air Canada and Jazz Airlines plane crash that happened at LaGuardia Airport in New York on March 22nd. So as we're recording now, that's about 36 hours ago. So we've had a time to do a quick snapshot of statements that were issued, CEO comments, videos that were done. And my special guest to help walk through the communications around this is Lee Caraher. Now, Lee is president of Double Forte PR, which is a national PR firm here in America with offices in San Francisco, New York, and Wisconsin. So Lee is a veteran crisis manager and brand manager who's going to offer some of her thoughts on the communications around the incident there. Lee, welcome to the show.
Tom, thanks so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
And I didn't mention it yet, but Lee is a published author, has two management books to her name, and we're going to talk to her about those on our next episode of the podcast. So
I'm never
please,
leaving, apparently.
so please come back for that one. All right. And yeah, Lee, I got a lot of questions for you about writing books and all that stuff, but let's take a look at crisis response here for
hmm
just a few minutes. For those of you who may not know, this plane crash occurred on, I said March 22nd, happened about 11:40 p.m. at LaGuardia, and this was a regional jet that was landing on the at the airport when a
Sorry.
fire truck crossed the runway, and the plane unfortunately collided with that fire truck, doing horrific damage to both vehicles. But both pilots were killed on the aircraft. 41 other passengers and crew were taken to hospital with various injuries, which I guess in hindsight, it's sort of a miracle that there weren't
Oh
more
my gosh.
fatalities associated with this. And there's lots of video and photos online you can see and check. But it kind of reiterates, this didn't happen at 9 a.m. on a Tuesday. This happened at 11:40 p.m. on a Monday night, which means your crisis plan has to be 24-hour ready to go. And you're not going to get a call at 9 in the morning. You're going to get a call
Ugh.
at 1 in the morning
hmm
and need to get you mobilized, get your plans going. And so that just speaks to the need to be ready. Lee, do you think most companies are ready for this type of a call out in the middle of the night?
No. Well, I think that there are certain industries where you have a plan because it's required. I mean, for air, this is what's sort of strange about this situation is that in general, airlines are required to have this done, and they have to go through, different airports require different training and all that kind of stuff. So I think what is one in general, people are not they're not ready. They're not ready for a crisis, and they haven't thought about all the different kinds of crisis that they could get hit with.
Mhm.
So and when I started my firm, I purposely said I wasn't going to do crisis because crisis doesn't happen at Monday at 9. Crisis happens around 4 o'clock on Friday or 10:40 or 11:40 on a Sunday night. That doesn't happen on the regular schedule. And in the end, we actually, then Twitter happened, and then everyone does crisis now. You can't not do crisis. So the first piece on this is you have to be prepared, and you can see how in the rollout of how Air Canada handled the situation, you can see that they were prepared. Um, because they had all the pieces ready to roll. That wasn't they did absolutely had some of the pieces. The timing is the timing is terrible. Um, and I think it was probably complicated by the fact that it was actually a Jazz Airlines company that was operating as Air Canada, and I assume there were rules on that because that
Well,
doesn't make any sense.
let me just set that up for our listeners, and we'll jump into that real quickly because it's not an uncommon ownership issue here
Hmm.
in or with airlines that you have a wholly separate company that's operating a regional airline
Right.
that is not owned or operated by like Air Canada in this case. So Jazz Airlines, completely
Hmm.
separate company, owned by a publicly traded company. And yet they carry the Air Canada brand on
Right.
every aircraft they fly. So your plans have to be linked very
Hmm.
closely. But anyway, that's not unusual, but it does add a level of
Yeah.
complexity to the
The ownership
response.
is unusual, but the fact that they weren't, it looks like someone was missing or they didn't have the coordinated plan because it was clear that Air Canada have its pieces, right? I mean, even the timing on this is 11:40 a.m. No, I'm sorry, 11:40 p.m. on Sunday night, and then it's 2:45 a.m. on Monday morning until they've actually Air Canada posted Air Canada, which has the brand on the side of the plane that was in all the photos. 3 hours of photos with the Air Canada on the done. Of course, it's in the middle of the night, but it doesn't really matter because news is news, and an air crash with a fatality is always news. So that's 3 hours and 5 minutes, which is an eternity in a crisis, and it's really an eternity in a crisis with a fatality, because you can have crisis without fatality, it's still crisis, but a crisis with a fatality just is even it just crisis to the X kind
So
of
you're a
thing, right?
big believer in the golden hour then of getting a
Oh,
statement out within
half
an
an hour.
hour, half an
I
hour.
mean, I think for if you're in this business, so if you're in the air traffic, if you're in the flights, if you're in the gas business, I mean, there's some businesses that are just you just things are going to happen and it's going to be bad. Then I think today, because everyone has a phone and we have everyone has their own phone and there's going to be social media always before a company can respond. So you just have to give that up. Just know that there's going to be social media about a crisis, probably this kind of crisis where it's visible, before you can react. But that you don't really have an hour anymore. You really, 15 to 30 minutes is sort of they got there on time. They were ready. Somebody made a phone call, and there was a chain, right? And the
Right,
right person, went into the crisis file and pulled out the template, and then they updated the template to the situation and they sent it out.
right.
And when you are prepared that way, and it requires you to have redundancy and it requires all the things, but these kind of companies, they were clearly prepared. I mean, half an hour, half an hour.
Yeah.
The fact that it was 3 hours and 5 minutes, and the fact what they actually posted was we're aware of the situation,
Mhm.
not like what they should have posted.
No,
But
but that speaks to the midnight call out,
yeah.
probably, right? Hey,
Hmm.
let's get the lawyer. Wait, we can't get the lawyer on the phone. He's not picking up. Wait,
Yeah. Well,
you
and that's
get
why you
those.
can't, you have to have those vetted by legal before this
Mhm.
is where PR and comms always fights with legal, always.
Yep.
It's like, no, you're not going to change the statement. Everyone knows, do we want to take control? So you do need to have those legally approved um statements that are in the can, ready to be updated, like fill in the blanks, that if you don't get legal and have that contingency, we're going to call Bob. Bob's the lawyer. If Bob doesn't call back within 10 minutes, it can go.
Hmm.
Because you're going to have, in any kind of crisis, you're going to have plenty of time to add on, right?
Right. That's
And
right.
the key on this is a lot of companies make the mistake. I don't want to do anything until I know all the facts. They make that mistake all the time, right? But you're never going to know all the facts, right? You
Right.
just aren't. So it's better to say we're aware of it, and we're on it. It looks, and we don't know much. We're getting all the
Hmm.
information, and as soon as we have no more, we'll get back to you,
Well, and
even when you can't do anything.
the statements that I've included in planning and crisis
Mm-hmm.
plans, they're designed to be pulled out and used, right? You don't even
Exactly.
need to update.
Right.
It's just that awareness. And I think we saw that in the first statements that came out from Jazz. Airlines. It was just basically an acknowledgement.
Hmm.
Hey, we're aware there's an
Yeah.
incident. More information will be
Here's the phone
coming.
number. Well,
And
I think
then,
that the Air Canada added that really quickly, right? So, I mean, I think they had the statements, they just didn't have the protocol on timing, and there
mhm.
clearly was some breakdown between the two companies.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
You
you're
know,
a pretty harsh critic here, Lee, in terms of the
well,
timing of it.
they're people. People died. And if you're going to be in that business, you got to like know. So someone,
Right.
and this happens a lot, right? 99.99% of the time, flights go up, flights go down, and it's a 1-to-1 ratio. Um, and it's such an extraordinary experience. That's why it's so newsworthy. More people die in car accidents every year than will ever die in an airplane accident. But the image is so horrific. The idea that you're with many, many, many other people and that you could get such a high body count at the same time is why it is newsworthy. So the it's your responsibility. So I know that when we go on vacation in my agency, I always say, it's a long holiday. All right, who is on point? Somebody tell everyone needs to tell the client who's on point if something's wrong. Now, if we do that, nothing's ever wrong. And with when we forget to tell the
Mhm.
client who's on point, something goes wrong. And I don't mean to laugh at this horrible, horrible situation, but it is
Right.
Murphy's Law on this.
It
You
is.
just have to be vigilant and disciplined about these things when you're in this kind of business.
All right. Let
And
me step
somebody
back,
wasn't.
Lee, and take a look because we had Jazz issued the first
Hmm.
statement kind of early morning hours.
Yeah,
Air Canada was shortly behind with
yeah.
just a factual statement,
Hmm.
basically saying, Air Canada and Jazz are cooperating with the
Yep.
investigation. Didn't see any empathy, no CEO
Yeah, big
quote in the
mistake.
Air Canada piece, which I'm
Hmm.
wrestling with because it was Jazz Airlines. But at the same
Hmm.
time,
It's
it
their
is a missed
brand.
opportunity for the Air Canada team, right? At
Totally
least
agree.
in the statement.
Hmm.
Um, but then we did see a CEO video came
Hmm.
out from Air Canada later in the day following the
Hmm.
crash. So maybe 12, 15 hours later. I didn't see
Yeah,
the
not
ex.
about 12 hours. Yeah.
Okay. Which, depending on your organization, might be pretty good for getting a CEO video out. But, if we just, I'm going to play some of that
Hmm.
video here, Lee, and then get your thoughts on it. Okay.
Sure.
And I'm kidding. I'm not going to play it for
I
you.
know.
Well, that was CEO Michael Rousseau
Hmm.
giving us his take on that. Now, his words I thought were pretty well done. I
Hmm.
mean, he got the empathy in there. It was an English language video in a country that is, a lot of French speakers. And I noticed a lot of criticism of him for
Hmm.
only doing this in English, although it was French subtitles. But that did not work for probably half of their audience out there. Would Here's a question for you, Lee, before we dive into
Hmm.
the specifics on it. Would you have another executive do a French language video of that if the CEO wasn't a French speaker?
Is
Maybe
he a French speaker? Do we know that?
he's not.
He's not. So, yes. Well, I think one, I did not know that. And when I saw the video first with the French subtitles, I'm like, oh, well, they landed in the United States. So, of course, they did in English first. That was my reaction. But of course, I'm in the United States. So,
Mhm.
that's probably my point of view. Yes, I would have done a French language version by somebody else right at the same time or right leading afterwards. It's unfortunate that he's not French speaking since it is Air Canada. The and I think that the other piece on that, it was he was it was late, and I wonder if they did it because they had such many criticisms about how late they had been. Um, because Jazz didn't do that.
Yeah.
And not you don't always get the CEO doing this because Air Canada is relatively large, and I wonder if man they're getting crucified. And if we put the CEO up, that would be a good thing, and it is. Yeah, I thought it was a good thing to do.
Mhm.
in
How
that
did you like
situation.
his affectation there? He
He's
seemed a
very
little
he
stiff,
was very stiff, and
uncomfortable.
not every CEO is made for being in front of the camera. We can just look at the McDonald's CEO from a few weeks ago. So, but what it did do, him not being polished, I don't think is a problem because him doing it was very important. Him not being polished, it would be great if it was easier for him to do, but it also came across much more real, much more authentic, much more like this is so I'm clearly uncomfortable and I'm clearly having a hard time with it, and not just because it's hard to do, but because of the message I have to deliver is how I
Mhm.
interpreted that.
Yeah.
So I felt that it was real. Was it elegant? No. Was it the right
Yeah.
words? Absolutely. And he doubled down on the phone number and those things. So he was delivering not just the corporate message, but the important message, like call this number if you think you have a family member. So I felt
Mhm.
like, he wasn't just, coming in for the hot top tip and then having somebody else like deliver the nuts and bolts. So I appreciated that a lot. But I also wonder if they were going to, if they felt they had to because they missed the time window.
Yeah. Well, and I appreciate your take on that. I mean, I look at that and I think this is a CEO. Now, of course, this is a human being, right? And we
Mm-hmm.
each have our different levels of comfort in various settings. Some are
Mm-hmm.
very comfortable in front of a large group talking, but sort of lock up in front of a camera.
Yeah.
And you've got to balance all that. I was looking for a little more, maybe empathy from
Yeah.
him, a little more facial
Feeling.
expression,
Yeah.
feeling. Yeah, the sentiment.
Mm-hmm.
Um, a little bit of hand gestures maybe to make the points. He was a
Mm-hmm.
very stiff
Very stiff.
person, right?
And
And
my gut on that, Tom, is that was probably his fifth take. And they were like, just get it done because we're losing time here.
I
That
did
was not a
notice
first take situation.
it was not. I did notice some cuts through the
Yeah.
final video that came out there. So I think
Yeah.
you're spot on there. It was a heavy lift to get that done. Now, of
Mm-hmm.
course, we contrast that with maybe what we've seen from American Airlines or
Mm-hmm.
Southwest Airlines in the past, where those CEOs are just so good
Yeah.
doing this, delivering a tough message. And to me, they're the go-tos for all of this
Yeah.
in terms of delivering it well. But
I'd
uh,
agree.
yeah, to your point, though, they did it. They got it done, which is good. So overall, Lee, when we think about the communications
Mm-hmm.
response here, your take is they got the words right. They missed on the timing
Mm-hmm. They got the
for it.
words and the stuff right, right? So they had Air Canada had the microsite ready to go. They had the phone number ready to go. They had the statements. They had all the pieces. It was obviously sitting somewhere, and they just turned it on. So they had clearly had all that ready. That doesn't happen, right? So they had all the pieces right. They the pieces were all delayed, and my gut says something funky happened between Jazz and Air Canada on that. And because really you get to the point now, it's NTSB and FAA, and they're not going to have a lot to say anymore because it gets taken over by those organizations. And then they'll obviously, the important thing they both said is they're cooperating with everybody who matters on that, but they're not going to have a lot to say in this process until they're done.
Right. So they get this short window to
Very
communicate
short window.
to their stakeholders about
Mm-hmm.
it. And I think, even letters to customers and all that
Yeah.
stuff have to be very clearly vetted
Yeah.
uh, with NTSB and others. So this is your opportunity to make your point, make your statement.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, there you have it. Kind of mixed reactions from Lee Caraher and Tom Mueller on this, but thankfully that they were prepared, did get communications out, and we're very happy to see that. And we wish the best for everyone as this
Absolutely.
investigation goes forward, and just bless the hearts of all the family
Mm-hmm.
members of those who've been impacted by this.
Yeah. And the air traffic controller guy, I mean, he's trying hard. He
Yeah.
was he was yelling a lot and I know
Oh,
he just must be just crushed. And particularly right this second, I'm just going to say it, this right this second where we have this, the U.S. government shutdown and TSA is not getting paid and all the pieces, and we already know that this whole structure is underfunded. To have this on top of it is just these people are helping us travel safely in the air,
mhm.
and to have this on top of it is just crushing. On top of the loss of life and the scariness and all the people who've been hurt. So, ugh,
Yeah.
ugh,
Lee, thanks for joining us for this episode.
happy to be with you.
And that's going to do it for this episode. Thanks so much for all of you for joining us, especially our overseas listeners. We'd love to hear from you and tell your friends and colleagues about us. And we'll see you again soon on another episode. Take care.